Hello and welcome everybody, I am CyberHex and welcome to today's video. I know, it has been a hot minute, my motivation always, peaks and valleys, and that was a pretty big valley, unfortunately. Today I am here to talk about matchups again, because I had a lot of fun with my last matchup chart video, and you guys seem to enjoy it a lot too. So I did some thinking, who would be a fun character to cover next? And, I could pretend that the Maypul reveal from, a couple weeks ago, whenever this goes up, that was what inspired me, but to be honest, I've had this in the works for like 2 months probably, and I just didn't finish it. Let's just pretend I'm a genius, right? That Rivals 2 trailer was really sick, wasn't it? I wish Maypul was that cool in Rivals 1. But no, in all seriousness, I think Maypul is certainly an interesting character, right? Very fast character, fastest ground speed in the game by default, along with some really interesting combo mechanics with her tether. Overall making her a very strong character, but just how much does her matchup chart reflect that? So today I've gathered 6 of the best Maypul players I could find to all make matchup charts. Those players being Soul Rifle, Zora's Knight, Elpie, Elkies, Jay Lindy, and Matinem. Got all of them to make a matchup chart for me, and now we are going to shove them all together and see what we got. Keep in mind, of course, the final matchup chart, for one, it's not going to be an excuse for you to say any matchups are winnable. None of these matchup charts are. Never take that out of these videos, please, I'm begging you. Second of all, obviously, since this is an amalgamation of opinions, each of these players are probably going to have minor disagreements with the final result, and odds are you might also have your own disagreements with the final results. These are kind of just a fun way for me to do a mini dive into each matchup for each character and get a general idea of what their matchup chart looks like. This is not meant to be taken like super duper seriously, so just keep that in mind as well. Also, I will be presenting all of the, info in this video, but keep in mind, I am no Maypul expert, so all the players that I pulled, gave their own opinions on the matchup and some explanations on it, so I'm taking everything I'm saying here primarily from what they said in their form. So if you have any corrections you want to make, if I happen to relay any info that's slightly incorrect, please do not hesitate to correct me in the comments, and I will be sure to pin any info that I trust. So I think that covers everything I wanted to cover. Of course, also like and subscribe if you like this content, and feel free to suggest future characters to cover in this series down below. I'd be more than happy to take on your guys' suggestions. With all that said, let's jump into the first character, that being Zetterburn. Alright, so you all know Zetterburn, right? This character has a lot of similar matchups across the board. I mean, a lot of the time, you gotta be careful about not getting hit, and you gotta be really good about ledge trapping him. And surprise, surprise, that is a lot of what the Maypul Zetterburn matchup is like. The edge guard for this matchup is certainly huge for Maypul, right? You do have to position your Lily properly to not give him easy ledge dashes. It's always going to be a major aspect of ledge trapping Zetter, or just not letting him ledge dash on you for free. But once you kind of get the feeling of exactly where you want to position Lily on ledge, it can be really hard for Zetter to get back, and that is essentially your checkmate situation for most stocks. While the ledge trapping is kind of the big thing that Maypul has in this matchup, the fact that she's so fast in neutral and just generally has a really good neutral is also pretty useful. Not to say Zetter neutral is bad, of course, but he's not really as fast as Maypul, so it can be really hard for him to keep up. He's kind of got to make good use of like Fireball and stuff in order to limit Maypul's movement options, but Maypul is just so speedy that that's really difficult to do with such simple tools a lot of the time. That being said, of course, again, it is Zetterburn. He's going to Galaxy you at probably like 80 or something. So if you let him get in on you, you are in a really bad spot. Because of that, Maypul does have to play pretty on point for most of the match in order to, actually win. But generally, it's not too difficult for her. In terms of the overall ratings here, everyone's at either even or 55-45, just kind of hovering between that like even or very slightly winning section. In total, that kind of puts Zetter right on the border of like slight win and even. I decided to bump him into the very bottom of the slight winning category, but this one can definitely go either way for Maypul. So now we're getting into 4s, and if you can believe it, there was only one matchup that was universally agreed to be losing, and that was Forsburn. So, its character might be kind of busted, guys. But to talk about the Forest matchup specifically, there are a lot of potential problems that Maypul has to deal with in this matchup. Now, unlike a lot of characters, smoke isn't actually a huge problem for Maypul. Seed's able to clear smoke really fast. With offstage, she does have her whole dashes that can help clear smoke as well, so she's got a lot of ways to deal with smoke. It's kind of the everything else that Forest does really well is the problem. Also with the recent smoke nerf, that also just makes smoke even easier for Maypul to clear, though again, that wasn't really a huge issue in the first place, so I doubt that would actually end up being a massive help for Maypul most of the time in this matchup. One of the biggest issues for Maypul is just that Force has a really, really good edge guard on Maypul. The fact that he's able to just kind of throw out these massive hitboxes that are relatively safe means that Maypul has to be extremely precise with like when she chooses to get on stage, and a lot of the time Force just can kind of throw out another hitbox and cover that anyway, so getting back on stage is a nightmare for Maypul. And neutral isn't that great either. Force is a lot better at maneuvering on plats and using plat drop aerials to stuff out Maypul, and Maypul has to be really on point when it comes to getting in. And even if they do play the ground game, I mean, Force has Cape. That is one of the best ground control tools in the game. And with Maypul being a character that really likes running around and just kind of scurrying back and forth on the ground, yeah, Cape's going to keep her movement in check pretty nicely, a lot better than most characters can. Now, it's not like it's all doom and gloom for Maypul, of course. I mean, her mobility is still going to help her maneuver around Cape when she plays really precisely, but you do have to be super careful, because if you get hit by Cape, then you're probably getting hit by like a jab or a down tilt, and then you're just taking a lot of damage from that and likely being put off stage, which is likely death. Force in general is just really good at carrying people off stage, so that also doesn't really help. She can clear smoke pretty well. She kind of does have to camp a little bit in this matchup, which is kind of the case for a lot of her like slightly more difficult matchups, where, you know, that slower defensive play is a lot of how she's able to really gain mileage. The thing about playing slow and defensive against Force is that kind of lets him put up smoke for free, which is not really something you want to let him do. At the very least, again, Maypul's not that bad at clearing smoke, probably around middle of the cast if I had to guess, so it's not like it's a huge deal when he puts up a ton of smoke, but it's definitely something you want to avoid, because especially really good Force players are able to abuse smoke in ways you couldn't even imagine, and letting them snowball like that can get out of control even as a character that can clear that smoke pretty reliably. In terms of the overall rating for this matchup, everyone said 45-55 except for Soul Rifle, who was as bad as 40-60. Like I said, this is the only character where everybody rated it as being a negative matchup, which is kind of crazy to think about, that this is the one that Maypul's universally agree as being terrible. However, it does kind of make sense. Again, Force is just really good at plat dropping on you, has some pretty good range, but also decently good frame data compared to the other really long range characters, so very good balance of stuff that can kind of just mess with Maypul and make her life a little bit annoying. Alright, next up we have the Clairen matchup. And this one I think does have some similarities to the Zetter matchup from what I can gather, and this is the one I can actually talk about with some knowledge, because I play Clairen, ahaha. So a big thing here for Maypul is just abusing her speed, right? I mean, obviously that is a big part of the character, is abusing your speed, but Clairen in particular, being a character with pretty bad frame data and abusing her range more than anything else, she's going to be really susceptible to characters that can whiff punish reliably, and surprise surprise, Maypul's pretty good at whiff punishing. Now obviously Maypul doesn't really have tools to directly contest anything Clairen can throw out in neutral, but that's not really a huge deal when you're able to just kind of get in there anyway off of most of Clairen's buttons. So that's essentially how most Maypuls are going to be playing this matchup, is trying to look for opportunities where Clairen's going to press a button, you know, let her press the button, and then go in and ruin her life, essentially. And that being said, you know, Maypul does have to be a little bit careful about not running in recklessly, because if she starts getting reckless, then Clairen can just pretty effortlessly just go like F tilt, down tilt, nair. That's not nair. I don't think I can do a nair motion while I'm sitting down. Clairen also has a really big edge in the advantage state when it comes to Maypul. Obviously, tether combos are really scary, and it's not like Maypul has a bad edge guard on Clairen, not at all. Lily can be pretty obnoxious for Clairen to get back in on, but it's not nearly as bad as some other characters. I think at least in this matchup, you know, Clairen's recovery is not really good, but it functions well enough, right? Like, you're not really going to have that big of an issue with the edge guard if you're playing okay. Maypul, on the other hand, should be miserable every time she goes off stage. You have so many options between, you know, nair shutting down a lot of Maypul's, like, tether and side B options, down tilt to cover those farther outside Bs. You can, like, back air to catch high recoveries. There's so much you can do to ledge trap Maypul that it's really hard for her to actually get back if she does end up off stage. Clairen can also be a little tricky for Maypul to combo at times because of her high air drift. This means she can kind of get off stage a little bit easier and then put into those ledge tap situations, which, while not really good, aren't necessarily the worst either. And again, it is so much worse the other way around. That being said, of course, it really does depend on how much you're going to weigh the neutral, because Maypul's neutral on Clairen is really strong, at least in my opinion. Obviously, again, Maypul does have to play a little bit slow, but unlike the Force matchup, you know, as much as Clairen does have some pretty good grounded pokes, they're a lot more punishable than what Force has, so Maypul has a much better time kind of like contesting Clairen on the ground. And in general, that does make this matchup a lot more doable. And yeah, in terms of the ratings, this one was actually a bit of a mixed bag. So Elkies was the most optimistic with a 55-45. We had a few 50-50s and then a few that were in the 45-55 area. Definitely a mix of, you know, potentially slightly winning, potentially slightly losing. This is definitely one of the more controversial matchups, I'd say, of any of the ones that I can remember. In general, that does put it slightly below 50-50, but still close enough to 50 that we are going to be keeping it in the even tier. That being said, it is at the lower end of that even tier, so do keep that in mind. And as a reminder, because I did mention at the start of the video, matchups on the right side of the chart are going to be harder than matchups on the left side. So that is kind of how to read it, is like it'll be, you know, from the top, left to right, better to worse, and then better to worse, and then so on and so forth. Alright, so next up we have Mollo, our first workshop character. And as per usual, I do want to specify, you know, workshop characters usually don't have the biggest player bases, so these matchups do tend to be a little underdeveloped compared to the rest of the cast, but we will go with what we've got so far. And so far, things aren't looking the best for Mollo in this matchup, unfortunately. Not terrible, but not great either. There's a lot of things that Maypul can do to just kind of abuse Mollo. For one, Mollo's zoning isn't going to be that effective versus a character like Maypul, who is just so mobile. It's not that hard for her to break through his zoning. Plus, also bomb throws, Maypul should be able to dash attack to low profile those, so there's a lot of things Maypul can do to kind of, you know, get in on Mollo, essentially. But Mollo does kind of have good buttons, he just doesn't really have the speed to keep up with Maypul as well. Alright, so Maypul kind of just get on him fairly reliably. Mollo can't get in on Maypul the best, which isn't really great. Because of that, Mollo tends to have to take really big risks, which Maypul can then, you know, use her speed to just kind of mitigate those risks on her end, and then punish him for those risks. And there's also the fact that Mollo with a bomb in his hand is one of the worst game states in the whole game. And when you consider Tether, there's just so much Maypul can do to ruin Mollo, right? Not only that, but it's like if Mollo gets hit by his own bomb, but he's marked, then you can tether to him while he's in the bomb knockback. There are just so many ways that Maypul in particular can abuse Mollo holding a bomb. And again, every character can do that. Maypul sounds like one of the better ones at it from what I can gather. So this matchup hasn't been played a ton. So far, things are seeming really good for the Maypuls. You know, for as good as I make the matchup sound, everyone rated as a 55-45, no 60-40s or anything. So right now, just a universal, pretty good matchup, but nothing too crazy. On a somewhat similar note, we have the Orcane matchup. This is another character where he's got pretty good normals and pretty good frame data, but not the best mobility. It's not like Orcane's mobility is awful or anything, but it doesn't really hold a candle to Maypul's, obviously. I mean, very few characters can, but especially not Orcane. So because of that, a lot of the time what Maypul can do is just kind of slow down the pace of the game and outmaneuver Maypul, and then look for those, you know, few openings. But to be fair, it is really hard to kind of find like a great opening on Orcane if you have to really scrap with him. The matchup is definitely volatile because Orcane can abuse his frame data and kill power really hard against Maypul. I mean, being a light character, she's gonna die extremely early to like up strong, up air, you know, stuff like that. So Maypul does have to be careful dealing with Orcane because getting too close might end up turning on her really bad. But if she's able to play careful and just not let Orcane actually hit her, which isn't that out of the question, then she'll have a pretty good time and ends up being pretty comfortable. There's not really too much else to add besides mobility factor, honestly. In terms of ratings, there was a bit of disagreement here. Nobody said losing, as you can see. However, there was a range of just how good the matchup was. Elkies and J. Lindy both cite the volatility of the matchup as being a bit of a problem for the characters, putting it in even. Meanwhile, you have some people saying that it is straight 60-60. So overall, that kind of slaps it, you know, right around 55-45, and that is where it will be on the chart. So next up, we are getting to Etalus, and we're kind of keeping with the trend here, where these characters can really mess up Maypul if they get in. The problem is that it can be really hard for them to get in. However, Etalus does have a few little X factors up his sleeve that the previous characters didn't. Now, unlike those two, Etalus is especially known for his weakness to plat camping, and Maypul is totally capable of abusing that. It's not necessarily like her strongest suit, but she can do it. That being said, you know, she does like playing on the ground quite a bit, but nobody likes playing on the ground more than Etalus, and you really just can't do that with Etalus a lot of the time. You can sort of keep dash attack in check with Bear, but you don't have a super safe projectile like a lot of characters do. I mean, you got Seed, but that doesn't cause hit stun, so it's not like you can just toss seeds at him and stop him. Like, he's still going to be charging at you and probably hitting you for a lot of damage. Not only that, but Etalus has a very, very simple edge guard loop, and a very deadly one at that, right? It's strong, simple. You're kind of going to get destroyed off stage if you end up off stage, worse in most matchups, so it is really important not to lose neutral. Not only that, but Etalus being heavy and having some decent options to mass out a disadvantage can actually be a bit of a problem for Maypul. Good use of Nair can really keep Maypul's advantage in check in the matchup, along with Fair Armor being able to break out of certain options. So there's a lot that Etalus can do in disadvantage that you might not really expect. So you do always have to be ready for Etalus to just mash something at a disadvantage, and if you're not, and he hits you with like an air or something, then that could get really bad really fast. That being said, Maypul does still have a pretty good edge guard on Etalus herself, so it's not like the advantage is just Etalus, you know, it's still really good for Maypul. I mean, Etalus is, does have the biggest hurt box in the game, pretty much. You know, it's gonna be combo food in a lot of situations, but Maypul, again, has to be really careful about situations when her combos aren't super tight. Ultimately, it really comes down to how much Maypul can be patient against Etalus and just make it so that she's able to outmaneuver him using platforms, and potentially stuff him out with options like Bear and Nair. In terms of the ratings, it was definitely a bit of a mixed bag here. Nobody said losing, again, kind of like Orcane, but you'll see a bit of a range of how good people think it is for Maypul, with Sorriful and Zora saying it's losing, and to Zora's credit, he has more experience in this matchup than probably anyone else, and, you know, he's one of the people that still thinks the matchup is maybe like a slight advantage just because Maypul is kind of the better character, but also points out just how much you need to keep in mind of all of Etalus's little tricks and whatnot. That being said, other players were of course saying 55-45 and 60-40, so definitely a mixed bag overall, putting Etalus in the slightly winning category. Alright, so next up we're going to be looking at Ranno, and this one's actually a little bit problematic for Maypul at times. So the main thing with Ranno is of course his ability to play on platforms, and Maypul honestly doesn't have the best time contesting that against Ranno. There's a lot of situations where Ranno can get a lot of fairly easy plat chops on Maypul and hit her pretty hard for it. Now, his punish game isn't quite as scary for Maypul as Forza's is. However, the edgeguard itself is still about as bad, so once you end up off stage against Ranno, things are looking pretty dire for Maypul. So it's pretty important to avoid that. On the flip side, you know, Maypul's punish game against Ranno isn't awful, but it's kind of like Clairen, where with that high air drift, Ranno can end up off stage against Maypul. And unlike Clairen, Ranno's actually pretty good at recovering versus Maypul. There's a lot of little tricks he has, you know, Tungsten giving him so much momentum that he can just zoom right past Lily. Maypul kind of having to go off stage and challenge him when he does bubble stuff, which is not something she always really wants to do. It's not the easiest for Maypul to edgeguard Ranno, essentially. And with Ranno being able to put himself off stage so reliably in a disadvantage, not really ideal for Maypul. Now, you know, like usual, Maypul still does have the speed advantage overall, and can use really smart on-stage play with Lily to kind of force Ranno to come to her, and then abuse bad approaches from him. Alternatively, if Maypul has to be the one approaching, she can try to use kind of weird, unconventional angles to throw off Ranno. But overall, not really the best match for Maypul. It's definitely not all bad, right? Again, that speed advantage is just so big for the character, it's pretty hard to understate. But there's a lot of little things in this matchup that add up to make it a bit of an obnoxious one for Maypul to deal with. And, you know, those little things all reflect in their ratings here. All of them were either 45-55 or 50-50, trending towards being losing, though overall, Ranno is rated to be a little bit worse than Clairen, but still not quite bad enough to end up in the actually losing tier, so it'll be the very bottom of the even tier. Alright, so next up we have Hodan, and this one's kind of like Clairen in that there's a bit of opposites going on here. Maypul's a very fast character with really good neutral and kind of lackluster recovery. Meanwhile, Hodan is a character that is very slow with not the best neutral, but his edge guarding is insane. So you can kind of guess how this matchup goes, I think, from just that alone. Obviously, you gotta be really slow as Maypul not be too eager to jump in on him in particular, because Hodan has some of the best anti-airs in the game. You might as well accept that you've lost stock if you jump in on Hodan at a bad time, right? Sometimes he will just outright kill you for that one interaction, so you gotta be really careful about that. And obviously the ledge trapping is really, really problematic. You know, not super difficult for Hodan to just kind of ledge trap Maypul for a bunch of percent at the very least. And if not, you know, use charge fares to just outright kill her. So, gotta be pretty careful. That being said, if you can just kind of play slow and, you know, get like a small lead and just abuse that, then Hodan has to start coming to you. And then it's not particularly fun when Hodan has to approach people. Getting that lead can also be a bit of an issue for Maypul, as tether combos are a little bit worse against heavier characters. So it is important to keep that in mind as well, right? I mean, heavier characters take less hit stun, so by the time that you tether to them, they may be able to like air dodge for a much longer percent than a light character would, for example. And of course, in turn, also Hodan is known to have pretty deadly combos on light characters in particular. This matchup can be extremely volatile. A lot of what you have to rely on is really just the fact that Maypul has such a good neutral against Hodan, and if you mess up in neutral, then yeah, things are going to quickly spiral out of control pretty hard. Because of that, ratings were a little bit mixed, with people saying anything from 55-45 to 45-55. Just overall mixed bag. In general, Hodan was rated to be just barely above even. So we'll be in that even category, but you're going to get a lot of different opinions from people depending on just how much they value Hodan's various ways to cheese Maypul and, you know, win games off of really silly interactions. Oh boy, another slow heavy character. Can you guys guess what this matchup is like? So, yeah, Maypul has a lot of really big upsides in this matchup. I mean, for one, you know, kind of like Mollo, she's really good at playing that sort of mid-range. You know, so Kragg can't really, like, burst in on Maypul that reliably. He can't really pull a rock super comfortably, and even if he does get a rock out, Maypul can just dash attack under the rock and get on him anyway. And, you know, Maypul, with her mobility, has pretty easy time reacting to down B, so overall, it's kind of hard for Kragg to play neutral at all, and even recovering for Kragg isn't as easy in this matchup as it is in some others. It's kind of weird because Maypul does have a lot of ways to mess with Pillar, right? I mean, you have Seed to break those far out pillars. You can do, like, you know, side B, down B stuff off stage to mess with him on Pillar, and you also have down air tricks that can keep Kragg in check when he's sitting on Pillar. However, all that stuff can go really horribly wrong. Maybe not so much in the Seed situation, but the other things when you're trying to mess with raw Pillar. While Maypul can do it better than most characters, you also have to be really on point, because making a mistake against Wall Pillar can kind of just get you instantly killed. Obviously, as well, with Maypul having a pretty bad recovery and all that, it is not the best if she ends up off stage, because if she gets hit, Kragg is some of the best stage carrying in the game, and then you put her off stage, and then ledge trapping is really scary. Oh no, it's just not very good for Maypul. But thankfully it is relatively easy for her to avoid getting hit in the first place, and she does have a lot of ways to, you know, get Kragg off stage and then bully him on wall pillar, so overall ends up being pretty good for Maypul, or at the very least that's the common consensus. Let's get into the ratings now, actually. So everybody but LP rated this as a winning matchup. Though pretty much everyone that gave me notes on the matchup did point out that the matchup is extremely volatile, as I've pointed out, so it's pretty hard to put it too high. You do have a couple 60-40 ratings here, but for the most part, you're looking at around 55-45, and that is ultimately where the matchup was rated, right at 55. Because while at higher level, this matchup is pretty good for Maypul, there is a very steep learning curve to this one, so if you're new to the character and trying to figure out the Kragg matchup, do not feel bad. This one's definitely going to take some adjustment to figure out. And one more heavy here, we have Sylvanos up next, and this one actually didn't really go the way I was expecting it to. I always kind of went back when I played stuff, I always saw this as a bit of an even matchup, but I didn't play it too much, so I wasn't ever really sure, but the Maypul players that I pulled for this at the very least all seem very confident this matchup is really good for Maypul. It is kind of like Etalus, where Maypul has to be really careful about playing the grounded game, but unlike Etalus, where it's, you know, kind of like he just bursts in and does a bunch of damage, with Sylv it's more that he controls a bunch of space and convert off that into massive damage. Instead of having to stop him out, it's more so figuring out what his dead zones are and getting a habit on when he presses buttons to go in and hit him hard. And thankfully Maypul is pretty good at abusing that good old 45-degree angle dead zone that a lot of people like talking about with the Sylv matchup. That being said, you know, both these characters can live to a really high percent in this matchup. Obviously, Sylv being heavy, you know, it makes sense he's going to live pretty long, especially with tether combos being a little bit wonky against him. And of course, Sylv known to have slightly inconsistent kill confirms and kill setups in general. Sometimes Maypul will just live at a 150 and Sylv's got to hold that. Edge guarding is also a little bit weird in this matchup. I think neither side particularly likes being edge guarded, but it's not really the worst either. It's kind of somewhere in the middle for both. Arguably, Maypul does have a slightly better recovery than Sylv, at least in this specific matchup. I would definitely not say overall, but in this specific matchup, you know, Maypul arguably recovers a little better, at least. That being said, Maypul has to be really careful about how she stuffs out some of Sylv's more bursty recovery options, particularly the first part of Epi, where he's like, you know, not the part where he's like coming out of the ground. She's got a lot of ways to deal with Burr, like any character. Overall, every player that I pulled said winning. We had some 60-40s, some 55-45s. Interestingly enough, this is the first matchup that is going into the highest tier, which is, you know, the roughly 60-40 tier. So overall, pretty solid matchup for Maypul. Alright, and we have another character that is kind of heavy, kind of not, somewhere in the middle. It's Olympia. Lots of mixed opinions on this one, actually. Obviously, Olympia is, you know, for a character that's supposed to be really brawly and scrappy, she is relatively slow for that kind of archetype. Because of that, Maypul can kind of just abuse her speed and stay out of Olympia's range fairly reliably. However, Olympia still has a good amount of ways to get in, and when she does get in, it is pretty bad. Olympia is just a really good character at scrapping, and she has a lot of ways to completely just outright kill Maypul, whereas Maypul can struggle to kill Olympia at times, you know, Olympia being so heavy off the top, just heavy in general, and on top of the fact that, while Olympia recovering low is kind of just like, fucked, like that character has a really bad recovery, if Olympia can recover fairly high, side B and down B both let her get through Lily fairly reliably. It's not perfect, but pretty reliable. And kind of like Etalus, Maypul doesn't have a projectile with any hits done, which means that she can't really super comfortably beat out side B. You know, you should be able to wall it out with Bear, but you have to time that pretty well, and if you mess up the timing, then you're eating a big hit, Olympia gets back on stage, and she's gonna start a juggle, which is something she's really good at. And you know, on the flip side, Maypul edgeguarding Olympia can be pretty inconsistent, whereas Olympia has Crystal, which happens to be really, really good against Maypul if you can't gas. That recovery can be a bit of an issue for the character at times. So Maypul kind of gets dismantled off stage. She can get juggled and up-E'd and killed super early. Lots of ways for Olympia to kill Maypul. It's just a matter of, can Olympia get in? A lot of the time she can, but you know, it does take a bit of effort on the Olympia's part. So Maypul has to kind of play slow and steady like in a lot of matchups, abusing that speed to play more evasive and making Olympia press really bad buttons and just leave herself like super wide open. So if you can do that as Maypul, you should be pretty comfortable, but those little mistakes are going to add up extremely fast, like with most of the other heavy characters. And again, in terms of ratings, this is a very, very mixed bag for Maypul. Some people were saying 55-45, most people saying even, hovering around that area, though Zora thinks that it's 45-55 right now, just citing that sheer like ability that Olympia has to scrap, because some people can keep her out. Olympia is so good enough at getting in that it's probably going to happen eventually, and then it's going to be really bad for Maypul. Matt also pointed out that he thinks that if the Olympia meta develops a bit, it could end up shifting into a winning a Mii for Olympia in his opinion as well, though it really just depends on how Olympia players are able to develop her meta and where the character goes. Alright, so now we're getting into the air characters, and something that I really didn't expect, but is a trend that we're going to see, you know, as we go through them. Maypul happens to be really good versus the air characters, which I find really surprising. Starting off with Wrastor, this is, you know, generally considered the best character in the game, and yet Maypul seems to fare pretty well against him. These are both characters that, you know, really abuse their speed to just kind of make the opponent whiff and then hit them really hard. And yeah, that's kind of just what happens here. You know, these two characters do their best to abuse their speed and then hit each other really hard. What's nice for Maypul, however, is that she does have slightly more range than Wrastor. While Wrastor with Slipstream is going to have the speed advantage, Maypul can still kind of stuff him out fairly reliably, and then kill him obscenely early with Tether. Now granted, obviously, it is Wrastor, he can still kill her early back with claps, so it is not like it is a one-way street here, but, you know, the Tether kills are going to be coming in this matchup a lot easier and a lot earlier than basically anywhere else, which is a huge advantage for Maypul. The juggles from Wrastor can be a potential issue for Maypul, of course. I mean, again, like, disadvantage is going to be really bad for both characters. Neutral, I mean, I don't really think there's much to add, honestly, right? These two characters are just kind of really fast, so they're just playing around each other's hitboxes and movement and trying to bait themselves into an opening. So, and these characters kind of share a lot of strengths and weaknesses, so, you know, not too much to really go into in this matchup. They just kind of blow each other up pretty hard. Ratings for this matchup, we're mostly looking at 55-45, there's a few even ratings as well. Slightly a mixed bag, but overall it's going to be putting Wrastor in the winning category. And if, like I said, Maypul does really well against these air characters, so it's only going to be getting better from here. Alrighty, so now we have Absa. Again, another really good character, but this one, unlike a lot of the other top tiers, is a lot more about, you know, zoning. And as we talked about some of the other more zoning-oriented characters earlier, Maypul's kind of good at just running right past character zoning and hitting them for it, and that's not really any different here. While Absa does have pretty good mobility, a lot of what makes her mobility so strong is that she can do it while throwing out clouds to impede your movement. But if you can just kind of run right past Cloud, or you can CC and then quickly keep running in and abusing your speed, then those clouds suddenly aren't going to be all that scary. So Maypul has a pretty easy time getting in on Absa compared to the rest of the cast, and then when she does get in, Absa being light and floaty and not having a real double jump is kind of susceptible to a lot of Maypul's little tricks. You know, tether combos are going to be super reliable against her. Because Absa doesn't really have like a normal double jump, you know, she kind of hovers in place for a second, it's going to be a lot easier for Maypul to kind of keep combos going in situations where an opponent's option is just to jump. Which leaves Absa open to some really strong follow-ups from Maypul that she might not be able to get against most of the cast. And of course, on top of all of that, Absa is going to be dying really early to tether stuff, particularly, the tether up air nair mix-up. On top of that, since people can just get it on the zoning so well, Absa might be forced to scrap a little more than in other matchups, and Absa isn't the worst at doing that, but she's definitely on the weaker end of the cast. So if people can kind of just get close to Absa and keep, punching her with jabs and down tilts and stuff, it's going to be pretty hard for Absa to really get much breathing room and fight back at all. Pretty much the one place where Absa does have a bit of leeway here is the edge guarding. Absa does edge guard Maypul really well, and Maypul doesn't have terrible edge guarding on Absa, but it's not really great because Absa recovery is just super strong. The big thing that Absa has is just being able to kick Maypul to death and kill her super early with like fair and up air and that kind of stuff, and obviously there. Cloud ledge trapping, interestingly, wasn't mentioned by any of the players that wrote notes. However, it's just so strong against so much of the cast that I do imagine that even that little verse repeating with Cloud can be really obnoxious for Maypul, at least in certain situations. That being said, the fact that it wasn't mentioned kind of gives me the vibe that it's not nearly bad enough to make up for just how much Maypul destroys Absa in advantage, so overall looking pretty good for the Rat right now. And then of course carries over to the ratings, where no players rated this matchup as even, and it shows 55s and 60s. Overall putting Absa into the slight winning category, but on the higher end of that. Definitely one of the better matchups we've seen so far for Maypul. Oh, but if you thought Absa was good for Maypul... yeah, I don't even know if I really need to say much about this one. I think most people know Ellie Maypul is, it's not good. You have all the problems of, Absa not being able to jump out of tether combos, and, dying pretty early off the top, combined with the big hurtbox shenanigans of a character like Etalus. And, there's a little bit of good from both of those, I suppose, particularly the fact that, Ellie can sometimes air dodge out of tether combos a little earlier than the other air characters since they're all lightweights, but that's a really minor saving grace, and the neutral for Elliana is not good. It's really not good. Since Ellie is so slow, it doesn't really have the best ways of dealing with Lily, and since Maypul is so short, it is really hard to tag Maypul with missiles. Plus, Maypul being pretty fast and having a short initial dash, again means it's easy to catch cancel missiles, which is a big part of Ellie counterplay. Put all that together, and yeah, all Ellie's got is her punish game and ledge trapping. And sure, her punish game and ledge trapping is really good, but the neutral is just so bad. It's so bad, guys. So yeah, in terms of the ratings, I don't think it's much of a surprise that this is a slam dunk for Elliana's best matchup. Most people said 60-40. This is the only matchup that Zora rated 60-40, for example, so it's very clear most people are like, yeah, no, this one's pretty good for people. There were two exceptions, of course, those being Sora saying 55-45, and Matt giving the only 65-35 out of any player. So this is the only matchup that anyone rated that highly. So yeah, this one goes right into that top tier, and this is going to be Maypul's best matchup with very little competition, honestly. There's a pretty big gap between this and the next best. Alright, we're at Pomme now, and I'm sorry to say, I honestly don't have a lot to say about this matchup. Again, I think this just hasn't been played very much for very many people, so there's not a whole lot to note here. Basically, neutral just kind of tends to be really slow in this matchup, because both these characters want to just kind of sit back and like abuse their movement options and their zoning tools and just kind of roll from there and try to make the other approach. Ideally, Maypul should be able to just like slowly build up a bit of a lead by just kind of tagging little hits and being able to kill Pomme slightly earlier than the other way around. Everyone said 55-45. I mean, I'm sorry, I know this is really lame, but this character really is just exceedingly rare right now, so it doesn't really surprise me that there's not too much that people, like, there aren't really too many opinions people have about this matchup so far. In general, Pomme just can't really approach Maypul the best, whereas Maypul can approach Pomme okay. Not really the best, but still okay, whereas Pomme is just kind of suffering a lot of the time, so... Alrighty, so finally we are at the crossover characters, the last two. And starting off with Ori, these might actually be like the two most similar characters in the game. Both very small, light, fast rat characters. Now, Maypul of course is a lot faster on the ground, while Ori has the airspeed advantage, but both of them are still fast just in general. So a lot of the time, this matchup is kind of less about, like, stuffing each other out, and more so just reading each other's movements. Ori does kind of have probably better stage control with Cyan. Lily's still really good stage control, of course, but in this matchup it can be a bit of a risk, because Ori can kind of actually bash Lily, and then use Lily against Maypul and, like, kill her for it. Which is not really something any other character can do. Like, other characters can potentially use Lily against Maypul because of parry and foam, but no character can straight up kill you with Lily, which is you know, something that makes it a little bit scary for some Maples. You have to be really thoughtful with how you use Lily in general and be a lot more careful with it. One other note I got, which I think was really funny, is whoever plays better will win every time, except sometimes the Maple plays worse and wins. Make of that what you will, I guess. So this matchup was pretty much rated as even across the board, except for Jay Lindy thinking this matchup is just slightly bad because of Maple being able to have Lily bashed and then, you know, die because she put down Lily. And to be fair, I do understand getting your stage objects bashed is never a fun time, but for the most part even, that is where this matchup is going to go, right? In the middle of that even section. And last, and arguably least, we have Shovel Knight. Weird character, weird matchup, not particularly common, but still some stuff to talk about here. You know, most Maple players, you seem to consider it winning, but you do need to play the matchup really slow as Maple. It can very quickly go south. In general, like, Shovel Knight, you know, especially without relics, has a very limited neutral, right? So, like, he's got pretty good neutral tools that can stuff out Maple really well. But he's only got a couple of those tools, so as long as Maple is playing smart and being, you know, smart about how she plays around those tools, all things considered, it's not too bad for me. The way can also be a bit of a problem, especially when he gets Momentum Mail, because, I mean, come on, Shovel Knight, most Shovel Knights are going to get Momentum Mail, you have to be ready for that. Because of that, tether combos are going to become a little trickier in later parts of the game, but at first you should be able to abuse them about as well as most other characters. One other aspect about neutral, which I didn't initially mention, is that most characters do want to rely on their projectile to shut down Shovel Knight's side B. Maple cannot do that because, again, Seed doesn't have hit stop, so it's another one of those, or hit stun rather. So it's another one of those situations where you do have to be really smart. Side B I can imagine be a bit of an issue for Maple, so make sure you're playing around that, using plats properly and catching his jump cancels out of it. If you can do all that, you can kind of just better character Shovel Knight a little bit, but again, be careful because he does have some pretty early kill options, and especially if you get put off stage, that character can kind of just demolish you sometimes if the stars align. It just kind of depends. Ratings for this one were a bit mixed across the board. Half of the group did say 55-45. We had a few evens as well as Sword Rifle saying that it was 45-55 losing. So yeah, definitely a bit of a mixed bag there in terms of the ratings, though in general it is going to be sitting just above even, though still in that even category. And so with that, we have every single matchup covered here, and as you can see, this list is pretty lopsided. That, you know, slight win category is ridiculous. So yeah, this character kinda just a little bit good. Now, I did want to see what this tier list would look like if some of the evens that were on the lower end of even were bumped down into their own, you know, slight losing tier, so this is what that would look like if you're curious about an alternate look at this. This character, kind of really good, you know, going back to, I guess, the main version, because I do like the idea of using the same template for each one. Yeah, Maple players seeming very positive about the character at the moment. Of course, her best matchup was rated to be Elliana, her worst rated to be Forsburn. Those were both pretty comfortably in that tier. There was a bit of a hefty gap between that and the next best rated, and next worst rated, you know, inversely. The most optimistic player turned out to be Matt, with the most pessimistic being Jay Lindy. That being said, every single player had a positive rating for the matchups overall, so each player still feeling, you know, again, really good about the character, knowing that the character is kind of busted. And I do think that's kind of the general idea, or the general vibe I get from most Maple players, is they know their character is really good, and they are more than happy to take advantage of that fact. Once again, I do want to thank every player who agreed to be a part of this. This video would not have been possible without you, and, you know, I had a lot of fun making it, so I hope you all enjoyed a little look into Maple and her matchup chart. And of course, again, if you want to see more videos like this, you can let me know in the comments what character you'd want to see next. With that all said, I'm going to be heading out for the day. I've been CyberHax, and I will see you all next time. Bye!